work and see how much we can cover before we call it, before we say good night to one another. All right, so we'll be speaking to May 2022. The last question we looked at was November 2022, and we exhausted November 2022 that tested the audit approach. So let's look at May 2022, which is question 7. I guess that's the only question for this diet that tested the audit approach. Okay, the question reads, Bachi International Limited is a company with corporate registrations in both UK and Nigeria. The chairman of the company is based in Nigeria and from time to time travels to the UK to oversee the office there and order for the purchase for sale. To ensure steady supply of the products, some of the products are also ordered from China. Purchases from UK are charged to the Nigerian entity in pound sterling, while the purchases from China are charged to the Nigerian company in American dollars. In September 2020, the chairman embarked on a trip to Dubai for 2 weeks, where he spent part of his annual holiday. During this period, he hosted a couple of friends with the costs that were paid for by the company as the cost. Pardon me, I was abruptly. I don't think it was network. I think my system needs to be restarted. Apologies for that. I was just logged out. I didn't know what happened. It just logged me out. So please confirm you can hear and see me, please. Pardon that abrupt log out. Please confirm you can see and see me. Somebody should please do that. Okay. Thank you, KU. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Flora. Okay. So I was reading the question and let me go back to the last paragraph. I was saying in September 2020, the chairman embarked on a trip to Dubai for 2 weeks, where he spent part of his annual holiday. During this period, he hosted a couple of friends with the costs that were paid for by the company as the costs were above his annual approved holiday expenses. He subsequently traveled to UK and was quarantined for 2 weeks due to COVID-19 before moving to the usual business lodge that he uses. Despite using that period to oversee the UK company, all the costs incurred were borne by the Nigerian company. The products bought in UK and sent to Nigeria were charged at cost plus 25%. While the Nigerian company were responsible for insurance and freight, the goods purchased from China were forwarded to Nigeria at cost of landing in Nigeria plus 30%. The China-made products are less expensive and therefore give better profits despite the cost of the long-distance freight. Money was transferred to the chairman's account for the company's purchases in UK. The purchases made in China and the chairman's personal expenses. An agent in China bought the goods which were paid by the chairman. The UK company staff handled the documentation of all the transactions of the chairman while there and transferred them to Nigeria subject to the approval of the chairman. Separate records were not maintained for the chairman's expenses in the UK. However, his comparison of the results of the 2 units shows that for the immediate past financial year, the Nigerian company had performed suboptimally and way below the targeted profit in relation to the UK company. The chairman is very unhappy about this as he expects that his personal visit to UK will reduce the purchasing and associated costs. It is usual for the chairman to account for the cost of purchases based on his personal expenses attributed to each purchase together with the actual cost of purchase. The UK component is elated about this costing method, which favors it and would wish that this arrangement continues. The 2 units prepare separate financial statements which are audited by separate accounting firms before the 2 financial statements are consolidated in Nigeria for the chairman's evaluation required. Evaluate the appropriate justifications from the scenario above. The areas of risks or risk which the auditor needs to consider. Evaluate the appropriate justifications for the scenario above, the areas of risk which the auditor would consider. Well, it's a long, boring read, I would say. But then It's a classical risk-based audit question, classic one that requires keen eye for detail. So it's a long read, so you need keen eye for detail and ability to link specific facts to different types of risk. The scenario also is rich with red flags, actually, covering financial reporting, corporate governance, related party transactions, and operational issues. So it's a dynamic paper. It's a dynamic question. The provided solution is very comprehensive, I think, identifying numerous risks and providing a brief explanation or justification for each. Okay. Okay. So let's look at the examiner's report. A lot of risks mentioned. All right. So the examiner's report rightly points out that many candidates struggle to identify these risk portending issues from the scenario, which is the core skill being tested. Okay, the marking guide confirms that marks are allocated for both identification and justifying the risks. All right, this is good. So please, let's be taking note of these key nuggets, the examiner's report, the marking guide, and all that, so that when you're practicing, you'll be aligning properly. So what to and how to write such a question. Don't forget the prompt states appropriate justifications. So identification and justification. If you can't identify, how will you even justify in the first place? So you need to identify first. So what to write, you need to evaluate with justification all the areas of risk from the scenario. This means identifying the specific issue and explaining it, explaining why it creates a risk for the auditor or the business. So how do you write? A well-structured answer is critical for a question with so many potential points. So organize your thoughts, your response using clear headers based on the type of risk. You may not be able to categorize them, but if you categorize them each under headers like inherent risk, control risk, business risk, ethical risk, under each header, you could earn your mark, though the examiner didn't follow that. But then, anyway, you have to try to use bullet lists to state the specific risk and the justification. So if you are using inherent risk, now inherent risk is the risk due to the nature of the business itself. Yeah, so that's inherent risk. And inherent risks, based on what we've seen on the screen, inherent risk could be risk of foreign currency risk. Foreign currency risk can fall under the category of inherent risk because the company deals with or deals in multiple currencies, Great Britain pounds, US dollars, Nigerian naira, without a clear hedging strategy, which creates a high risk of material misstatement from exchange gains or losses. Another inherent risk is related party transactions. Transactions with the company's personal account and his other companies are not at arm's length. So they are not arm's length transactions. So it increases the risk of misstatement and improper disclosure. Another inherent risk is non-arm's length pricing. You see the arbitrary markups, 20%, 30% on purchases from the UK and China, create a risk that transactions are not recorded at fair value, impacting the company's or the Nigerian company's profitability. So those are inherent risks, 3 of them, if you categorize them or you choose to categorize them that way. And for control risks, don't forget during the lecture we said control risks are risks that the company's internal controls are weak or absent. So under control risk, you could have lack of segregation of duties is a control risk. The chairman's absolute control over purchasing, payments, and record keeping is a major control weakness, increasing the risk of fraud and error. Another control risk is poor record keeping. Separate records were not maintained for the chairman's expenses. It indicates a high risk of incomplete or inaccurate accounting making it difficult to obtain sufficient audit evidence. And also lack of oversight. There is no mention of internal audit function or internal control function or risk management and compliance function or a strong independent board to vet or check the chairman's actions. So lack of oversight is also a risk under control risk you can mention. The third one is business risks. Business risks are risks to the company's going concern and or overall operations, risk to the company's continued existence, sustainability, or going concerns and all that. So risks under business risk could be inefficient operations, like the chairman's personal trips, which include personal expenses and quarantine time being charged to the company. I drain on resources, do not contribute to efficient operations. And legal and compliance risk, using a personal account for company transactions could have legal and tax implications. For example, areas of money laundering, allegations, and tax evasions, possible tax evasions too. Then another risk under business risk is suboptimal performance. You see that the Nigerian company's poor performance, despite favorable pricing from China, is a major business risk that warrants investigation. So if you choose to categorize your risk under inherent, control, and business risk, is fine. But if you choose to follow the examiner's roadmap by just listing the risk and explaining them, it's okay. Whichever approach you use will earn you your marks as long as your content is rich. Your content is rich. Take note of that. Then the general strategies for earning your mark, please apply the facts. Don't just list concepts. Like, don't just say foreign exchange risk exists. No. Instead of saying foreign exchange risk exists, say things like, make statements like the purchases in Great Britain, British pounds and USD, but the company operates in Nigerian naira, creating foreign exchange risk as there are no clear measures in place to manage it, something like that. Those are general strategies to structure your answer. So you use a structured approach. Organize your thoughts and answer logically. The marker should be able to see at a glance that you've covered a variety and range of risks. Then justify every point. Try to justify every point. The marking guide is explicit on justification of every point. It said identifying 5 marks for identification of 10 risks and 10 marks for discussing each of them. And a point, don't forget that a point without justification is only worth half a mark. So try to justify every point. Then kind of emphasize saying use professional languages. So use technical terms accurately, such as segregation of duties, related party transactions, material misstatements, substantive procedures, like that. Very important to take note of, please. The question is actually worth 15 marks. So the marking guide says, or states, as we can see, 0.5 mark for identifying a risk and 1 mark for its discussion. This means you need to identify and justify at least 10 distinct risks to get full marks. So aim to provide a good mix of different types of risks. You could classify them under headers like inherent, control, business, and under exam confusion, if you can't, no problem. The solution has provided more than 10 points, which is a good strategy to ensure you hit the target. So for each point, follow the risk justification format. Risk justification. So for example, the risk of the chairman's personal expenses being paid by the company. The justification is that this is a related party transaction that must be properly accounted for and disclosed. It also points to a significant control risk and a lack of adherence to the entity concept, leading to a high risk of material misstatement and possible fraud or potential fraud, something like that. So by structuring your answer and linking each point back to the scenario with a clear justification, you are just simply demonstrating a professional level of understanding, and you earn seamlessly the maximum marks. So please take note of these points very, very practically. All right, so that's it for this question on technical question on risk. Question 7, May 2022. Any questions? Any contributions? Observations? Any questions? Nobody is engaging. Nobody has asked any question today. I believe we are clear, or are we, let me say, are we perplexed? Let me use perplexed, looking at the challenging nature of the questions. They look challenging, actually, I must admit.
They look challenging, actually. What I notice is, so for everyone you solve, at that point, it becomes very clear.
Okay.
But you just jump to the other one and
it will now
getting
look
to
tougher.
understand the requirement itself. There was a question you solved the other time. It initially it wasn't even looking like audit approach question initially.
Yeah.
So after you solved it, I had to take my time, check through. Audit can be like that oftentimes.
Exactly.
But we'll scale through.
Amen. Amen. I like that. I like that word initially. So it would be very bad to get into the hall and you are discovering a question that is not a particular topic. And you just discover you've not practiced it. So you see, these unveiling sessions are very good. They help you be like, okay, so a question can be this tricky. And a friend, when he was writing his ACCA AAA paper, sent me a question on money laundering. And I was looking at the question as forensic auditing. When I answered it, he was like, "You're wrong." I was like, "Wow, really?" He said the question was on money laundering. So,
Wow.
if you don't practice it, sorry. And when he wrote his ACCA AAA has one of the lowest pass rate. The guy scored 65 at first attempt. He had practiced all the past diet before that diet. ACCA AAA is different from ICAN, but though both of them have that same level of complex and very tight reporting structure or marking structure. So when he told me that, just like your comment now resonates, because at first glance, you look at it that this is not it. But man, going through it, putting the grind, practicing, you find out, oh, so this is how it is. Yeah, so I think that's why your quietness is showing that these questions, wow, so this is how they can be. Yeah, so let's go back and put in the grind. Once we read them, and it's a good approach, as you practice each chapter, please go through the questions, go through all of them. We may not have the time to share some thoughts on all the questions, because once it's 10 o'clock, we are stopping on the audit approach. I'll just share the past questions so that we can go in and do the work ourselves. So it's important to actually attempt all of them. The questions are much per chapter, but please go through them, practice them. Yes, someone. Please go through them. That's the only way to pass the AAA paper. And in the hall, I believe, no matter how the examiner goes haywire, trying to trick you, you'll be able to navigate it very seamlessly. Thank you for that comment. And I'm glad that's exactly the challenge a lot of candidates are going through. At first glance, you see it, how do I go about this question? But later, with explanation, practice, you find out, oh, okay, this is the route he was going through. You'll be able to nip it in the bud. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. All right. It's only Samuel that is engaging, and I'm enjoying his thoughts. So please engage. Let's know your challenge. Let's know your whatever you're thinking about these questions. Okay, so let's run and see how much we can cover. November 2021, question 1, the C and D part tested the audit approach. So the question reads, the guy's case studies are always too long, man. All right. This one is not that long, sure. So question reads, Eatwell Bakeries is a private limited liability company. It bakes bread and other confectionaries, which produces from the main bakery and another small bakery. In another part of the town, the bakery's products are sold from the 2 bakeries and 5 other outlets in the same town. Those who sell the products to other neighboring towns are distributors who buy the products outright and bear the risk of sale, or lose subsequently. The main administrative functions and the management of the bakeries are undertaken from the main bakery. The small bakery and the sales outlets keep some basic records on activities. These records are transmitted to the main office every morning by the support staff in each location. Detailed accounting records and putting everything together to ascertain performance is done in the main and administrative office. Though Eat Well Bakeries is a private business, the chairman has insisted on transparently ensuring that proper standards are maintained, as he believes and shares the view that the bakery is to be competitive and is able to excel among competitors and remain relevant. The partner you work under and the chairman of the bakery met in a social gathering, and after interactions between the two, the chairman decided to transfer the company's audit to your firm. Professional clearance was sought and obtained from the predecessor auditor, but not much other documentation was found to have been available. The partner knew the company to be a small one, but did not bother to do detailed documentation when the audit was started. You've come to continue from where the associates assigned to the task have reached, and to ensure that the expectations and confidence of the chairman is met, required. So that C part states, your review of the system of operations shows some challenges with the internal control processes of the company. Based on this, prepare a brief on number 1, the meaning of deficiency, which may need to be focused on as identified by ISA 265, 3 marks. Number 2, under C, the things required to be included in the communication to the chairman on deficiencies, 5 marks. And D, evaluate the audit strategies available from which an appropriate mobile will be selected for application to Eat Well Bakeries. Wow, technical question. Okay. So I think the question is technical. It's a mixed bag of theoretical and applied concepts, focusing on internal control and audit strategy. Wow, the scenario of this company, the Eat Well Bakeries, provides a practical backdrop actually for these concepts of internal controls and audit strategy. I think the parts C1 now is a direct knowledge question based on ISA 265. ISA 265 deals with communicating internal control deficiencies to those charged with governance. Okay, so let's see provided solution. Okay, provided solution correctly identifies deficiency and a significant deficiency as required by the standards. All right. Then the examiner's key, the examiner's report. Very important, please. Always look at the examiner's report as you are practicing. Okay, the examiner's report indicates many candidates struggled with this, pointing to a lack of familiarity with ISAs. Okay. And the C2 part. Let's look at the C2 part now, how the solution was structured. Okay, communicating. Okay, this part also tests understanding of ISA 265, okay, and the required contents of the communication to those charged with governance. In this case, the chairman, okay. I think this solution is comprehensive and accurately lists the key elements that must be included. Okay. And let's see the D part. Wow, this is the main part. There's another direct knowledge question on audit strategies, which is a recurring theme actually. This audit strategy keeps recurring in the ICAN exams. And the solution gives a good overview of the 4 main strategies we've looked at in the lectures: SFP approach, substantive approach, the system-based approach, and the risk-based approach. Put them in a tabular manner, in a tabular form. Okay, the solution is good. I think the challenge based on the examiner's report is that candidates may not be able to, or did not remember these points, and importantly, they will not be able to apply, they couldn't apply the case to the scenario of the small bakery. Okay, so let's see what to write, how to write it. Quite a technical question, but it's navigatable. Okay, so in writing this kind of question, for the C1 part, talking about the entire C part, internal control deficiencies, the C1 part, to get your marks, you need to state the definition of a deficiency based on ISA 265. So the solution we can see on the screen. provided is perfect. So 1 mark for the inability to prevent or detect misstatements, and another for the necessary control being missed. So I think the second part, you must actually list the required content of the auditor's communication, which includes not just the deficiencies themselves, but also the context. You need to write a list of points. You see, the solution gives a list like the description of deficiencies, explanation of their potential effects, an explanation that the audit's purpose was to express an opinion, not to report on internal controls, and also a statement that the report is limited to the deficiencies identified during the audit. Okay, so how many marks is the C part? 3 and 5 is 8 marks. Okay, and the D part is 20 marks. Okay, so for the D part, which is a higher, is a 12-mark question, what to write? What do we write in the D part? The question asks us to evaluate. Asks us, yes, evaluate the audit strategies. So that's what the question asks us to do, evaluate. So we need to evaluate the available audit strategies and select an appropriate one for Eatwell Bakeries. So it requires us to describe the strategies and then justify your choice based on the scenario. So how do we write that? So step 1 is to outline the strategy. So use a table like you've seen or a clear bullet list. Anyone, it's fine, to outline the 4 main strategies we spoke about. So for each strategy, give a brief explanation of what it is and its pros and cons. The provided solution format is excellent for this. Then step 2 is to apply to the scenario. This is where you differentiate a good answer from a great one. Applying to the scenario. A good answer does not apply scenario, but a great answer applies to a scenario. So for a small private company like Eatwell Bakeries, with a weak internal control system, remember in the lectures we spoke extensively about small companies, and it is also implied in the scenario, a substantive testing approach or a statement of financial position approach will be appropriate. In fact, a statement of financial position approach is better applied. So you should explicitly state this and justify your choice. So justification for the substantive or statement of financial position approach, you need to explain that since the company's internal controls are likely weak and documentation is minimal, relying on a system-based approach will be inappropriate. The auditor will need to perform extensive substantive tests to obtain sufficient and appropriate evidence, something like that. And the justification approach or justification against other approach, you need to briefly mention why a risk-based or a system-based approach will be less suitable. So for instance, a system-based approach is cost-effective only if controls are strong, which is not the case here we have seen in this scenario. So take note of that. So generally, strategies for earning your marks, please read the scenario closely. The scenario contains key clues, such as the company being a private limited liability company, its small size implied, and the fact that basic records are kept at multiple locations and consolidated at a central office. So these facts are critical for justifying your choice of audit strategy in part D of the question. And another strategy, try to reference the ISAs, mentioning ISA 210, ISA 265 and the ISA 210, which is mentioned in the broader context of the question, though you don't see 210, but it demonstrates a professional understanding of the standards if you can match or identify this, mention the standards in your answers. So be concise and clear. Use your table or bullet points, clear headers to make your answer easy to follow. The marking guide actually for these questions reward distinct, well-explained points. So let's see the marking guide. Okay. And don't forget, focus on the why. So for both parts of the question, it's not enough to state what. You must Also explain why. Why is the communication necessary? Why is a particular audit strategy better than another one? So you need to focus on that. And for the marking guide, we are looking at part C1. The marking guide allocates 1.5 mark for each of the 2 points. So you must clearly define both aspects of a deficiency from ISA 265 to get the full 3 marks. Then part C2, the guide allocates 1 mark for each of 5 points. So the provided solution gives us a good list of 5 distinct points to include in the communication. So that is fine, and ensure your points are well defined. Please don't overlap your points. Allow us repeating them in another way. Try to ensure your points are well defined. And the part D is actually a 12-mark question. So marking guide allocates 4 marks for identifying the 4 strategies and 8 marks for discussing them. Why? You see, the discussion is even more than the identification. It doubled the identification. Excuse me. So this means you need to clearly state the 4 strategies, which is 1 mark for each. Then provide 8 distinct points for explanation or evaluation across the 4 strategies, and that's 1 mark for each. I think a great way to approach this is to provide 2 or 3 evaluation points for each strategy, ensuring you have enough content to hit the 8-point threshold. And crucially, your evaluation must lead to a conclusion about which strategy is most appropriate for Eat Well bakeries, showing you have applied your knowledge to this scenario. You know, we concluded on the SFP approach. So that makes a lot of sense, and it shows you aligning it with the scenario. Tricky question, technical question, but then it's good. We are aware of the technicalities from now. All right. So that's it for that first November 2021 question on question 1, Eat Well Bakeries, C and D. Any question? Wow. I think the next one again is question 2. The examiner tested internal and external. Wow. All right. So any question on that first one? So we can run. We have like 15 minutes more to shut down. So let's see how many questions we can solve before we stop. Any question? Contribution, observation? Grace is on the call and Grace seems to be quiet. Where is UK? Okay, UK is not on the call. Grace, you're on the call. You're not speaking today. What happened? Are you with us? I know.
Sorry,
Grace
I joined
always.
late. I was engaged. Yes, I just joined. I joined
Okay.
like 30 minutes ago. I was engaged.
Okay.
So I
All
just
right. You're
joined.
welcome.
Sorry.
No problem. It's
Yeah.
nice to have you. It's nice to have you. You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay, somebody's trying to speak. Maybe okay, I think it's Grace mic that was on. Okay, so please feel free if you have something to say. Please go ahead. If you have a concern, go ahead and interject freely. So let's look at question 2. That same November 2021. Sunseed Manufacturers Limited, the A part of the question, I think tested chapter 6, the audit approach. So the question reads, thank God this one is not a long read. The auditors of Sunseed Manufacturers Limited had disagreements with the company on various issues. This came to a climax with the withholding of a part of the payment of the last audit fees. The auditors have also been disenchanted with the undue pressures of management and have decided that as a result of this and the withheld fees, will disengage from the client. The company's chairman, in consideration of the issues in the past, has considered the size of the audit firm as being partly responsible for its inability to manage adequately the pressures from the company accounting and management team. He has subsequently approached the firm for a change, and the partners have agreed or have accepted the engagement despite the predecessor auditor's declaration of the forfeiture of the firm's outstanding fees and none further involvement with the client and issues related or relating to the company required. Following the background to the client and the engagement, evaluate the internal and external business risks that need to be considered with respect to the client. Wow. I think this is the first time I'm seeing internal and external business risk based on what we've looked at. Wow. Okay. Yes, please. Yes, please. Go ahead. Somebody's trying to speak. Oh, okay. Just someone was trying to speak. Please go ahead and speak freely if you have any concerns. Okay, so I think this question is a direct test of our ability to identify and categorize business risks, talking about internal and external. And the scenario provides a clear context for why a potential new client, Sunseed Manufacturer Limited, might be a high-risk engagement. They have a history of disagreement with auditors, a management team that applies undue pressure, and a history of non-payment of audit fees. Quite a dicey scenario. Okay, so from the solution, for part A is a good comprehensive list of generic internal and external business risks. Good. So it correctly separates the two categories, which is key to earning full marks. However, I think we should apply more of the internal and external business risks to this scenario to be good to apply it. So looking at the examiner's report, indicates that while candidates did well on this part, the overall performance was below average, suggesting that they struggle with other parts of the questions. Okay, that is not in this. Okay, so the internal and external business risk was treated well, but A was good. Okay, that's a good one. All right, so let's see how to write this kind of question and answer it. In writing, I think the question asks us to evaluate internal and external business risk that needs to be considered. Excuse me. So your answer should be a structured list that identifies and justifies the risks, or justifies its risks. So how to write, structure your answer with clear headings, creating two distinct sections, internal business risk and external business risks.
But it can also be in tabular forms, all right?
Exactly. Tabular form is also fine. In fact, it will delineate your points clearly. That makes a lot of sense. And it address the requirement of the question, whatever form you want to do. It's good. Then the internal business risk, these are risks that arise from within the company's operations. So you must link these directly to the scenario. So for example, management integrity or the ethical risk. The core risk is the management history of undue pressures and withholding of fees. This indicates a lack of integrity and potential for management override of controls. So that internal management integrity risk should be stated. And internal control risk, the pressure from management suggests that the existing internal controls might be weak and that management can easily circumvent those controls. And also financial risk internally, the non-payment of audit fees point to a potential cash flow or liquidity issue, which is a significant financial risk. So internal business risk around these thoughts and what is structured based on what the examiner gave will suffice. Then for the external business risk, you know that external business risk are risks that arise from the company's external environment. The scenario actually did not provide specific external details, but you can infer general external risk for a manufacturing company. So inferring is allowed, like the economic environment, the general economic condition might affect the company's profitability. There may be competition. The company might be facing increasing competition from other manufacturers. Then risks like industry, regulatory risk. There might be changes in regulations or industry standards that the company is struggling to comply with, something like that. So think around those, and some thoughts around that was provided by the examiner. And he even said something like uncomfortable business environment. So there are a lot of risk to infer from the, not just from the scenario, but from general application. So general strategies for any your marks, you need to apply the scenario. Like I said earlier, the key to a great answer is to go beyond a generic list, especially for the internal. So for example, instead of just saying risk from weak management, you could say the history of undue pressures and withholding of fees from the previous auditor points to a high risk of management override of control. That's a great answer. and a lack of management integrity. This shows you have read and understood the case study or the scenario properly. So apply the scenario, especially for that internal business risk part. Then categorize your points. Explicitly separating internal and external risk are required by the prompt we see in the question. So it's crucial for getting full marks. Don't match them together. Categorize them. Then, yes, please, Sherifat. Can see your hand. Go ahead, interject freely.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
And thanks
You're
for
welcome.
Yes,
The
sir.
pleasure is mine. You're welcome.
Can we categorize all those pastel as external? Can we use pastel as external business risk?
Exactly. In fact, that's what we're talking about. The external environment, talking about pest, political, economical. Yes, please go ahead. Those are external business risks that affect the business. So you could use
But
that
relating to the scenario,
case.
right?
But from the scenario, there's no explicit. Most of the scenario talked about internal business risk. So I think you have to infer the external business risk. There's nothing talking about political issue or economic issue from this case. But the question has asked us to evaluate external business risk, so you can infer. If you read the scenario, there's nothing that talks about external environment. Maybe they said there's election going on and politics has affected. There's nothing like that. Economic downturn, there's nothing like that. Yes, Sherifat, go ahead. Your hand is still up.
I tend to bring it up. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, you're welcome. So in answering your both questions, you and Samuel, it's good, but there's no, from the scenario, you may not be able to link the external business risk. The internal business risk has a lot in the scenario, but the external, you may have to infer. So inferring is okay. It's okay because the examiner has asked us to. So you see that possible loss of major, you see possible is not in the case. Long-term decline in demand. So all these ones are inferred. So you're allowed to infer. You cannot apply it to the scenario because the scenario didn't give us explicitly anything, but you must answer the external business risk because every business is affected by its environment externally mostly. So the macroeconomic environment of the business affects the business whether it likes it or not. So you need to align properly. Okay, so like I was saying,
Excuse me, sir.
yes, please.
Sir, in our last class, there's a question we treated that we talked about business risk and financial risk. So I'm trying to think, what are like the examples of this financial risk? Because I know of business risk. What can we put like examples of this financial risk? Does it have to do with economic changes or something? Because even the examiner wrote business and financial risk. I'm trying to really know which one is financial risk when in this context of risk assessment.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So financial risks are mostly internal, not external. Financial risk could be liquidity risks, inability to meet obligations, long-term or short-term. So mostly financial risks are internal. But business risk could be categorized into two: the internal, which is mostly what bedevils a company. You look at the strength and weakness of a company is internal. Then opportunities and threats are external. So the financial risk in answering your questions are mostly internal, and they have to do with liquidity issues, running the company, losing money, losing revenue. Anything that has to do with cash flow management is a financial risk. I hope it's a bit clear.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So that's it on the issue of business, internal risks and external business risk. So we were saying you need to categorize your point by delineating or differentiating them. Let there be a dichotomy between both of them, the internal and the external risk. Don't match them together. Separate them. If you're using a table, have it this side, internal, external, this side. Let it be clearly differentiated. And as you're justifying your points, for each risk you identify, provide a brief, clear justification. Because if you notice, the marking guide gave us okay, so the marking guide gives or allocates 1 mark per point. So you need to at least state 5 internal and 5 external risks with their justification. So you may not be able to justify the external risk, or you could say possibly the company may be going through this externally, something like that, because it's not explicitly stated in the scenario of the external business risk bedeviling the company. And don't forget to also use professional terminology. I would keep stressing that in every point, use professional terms so that the examiner will not just read, he will just pass and mark you. Use terms like management override of controls, integrity risk, liquidity risk, business risk, all those terms that makes reading your paper very easy. And specifically the marking guide, the question is a 10-mark question. So with 5 marks for internal and 5 marks for external. To get the full marks, the 5 marks for internal, you need to identify and justify at least 5 distinct points. So the most important points are those directly stated in the scenario for the internal. Undue pressure from management, withholding of fees, and a history of disagreements. Those are the most important. These are the most direct and impactful risks from the scenario. You can also infer other risks such as weak internal controls, potential for fraud, and inadequate financial management as implied by the non-payment of fees. Then to get the full 5 marks for external risk, you need to identify and justify at least 5 distinct points. Since the scenario is light on external details, so you can use generic or general risks relevant to the manufacturing company. The provided solution list of external risks we've seen, for example, loss of contracts, new competitors, change in regulations, is an excellent resource for this. So in conclusion, please ensure your answer is well structured and clearly link the identified risks back to the scenario for the internal mostly to demonstrate your understanding and also to earn your full marks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is where we'll stop. There are a lot of questions, but then I'll share the script, the question and answer. You have to go through them. We have to stop here. We don't have much time. We can't, in the next class, continue the Q&A session. It's so much. So we stopped at November still 2021, but at least you have a roadmap and some clear direction on how to attempt, practice, put in the grind, and make sure you attempt all these questions as you read through the study text and also the short study materials, the PowerPoints I've provided for us. So we have to stop here today, and in our next class, we are not coming back to past questions. We are going to chapter 7, which is planning. So any question, contribution?